My name is Andrea Doko-Jelušić. I'm the Executive Director of AmCham Croatia, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the virtual event Tourism Perspectives in Light of Coronavirus Outbreak in a joint organization of AmCham's Croatia, Czech Republic, Greece, Montenegro, and Slovenia. Outbreak of coronavirus resulted in a global lockdown. With closed borders and stay-at-home policies, tourism is certainly one of the most affected industries. We are organizing this event in order to start a discussion on the effects coronavirus has on tourism and how will tourism look like in the post-corona times. What would be the new normal? I would like to introduce Mr. Tonči Glavina, State Secretary from the Ministry of Tourism of Croatia, who will be our representative at the panel discussion. Now, I would also like to invite my colleagues from other AmChams to introduce their speakers. Marco, Montenegro.
Thank you, Andrea. Dear members, guests, I am Marko Miročević, the Executive Director of AmCham Montenegro. I wish all of us above everything good health and a productive event on such a hot topic for all our economies. And I would like to introduce Mr. Damir Davidović, who is the State Secretary in the Montenegrin Ministry of Sustainable Development and Tourism, who will be our representative at this panel. So hopefully we will hear a lot of very interesting information for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Do we have Western Stacy from Czech Republic here? Western, do we hear you? It seems not. So it is my pleasure to announce that from Czech Republic, hello?
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 Do we have Western Stacy here from Czech Republic? From Czech Republic, our guest speaker will be Mr. Jan Herget, Managing Director of Czech Tourism. And now I would like to invite Vida from Slovenia to introduce their guest.
Hello from AmCham Slovenia. And thank you AmCham Croatia for this initiative and for inviting and organizing this web conference. So our guest speaker today from Slovenia is Marjan Biltram, Chief Travel and Mobility Officer of the company Nomago. So Nomago is the largest transportation provider in Slovenia with branches also in Italy and Croatia, and a regional intercity bus service. Nomago also specializes in air travel and customizing incoming and outgoing travel packages for individuals. So Mr. Marjan Biltram has over 20 years of experience in the travel and tourism industry. He's one of the pioneers in implementing digital strategy in the traditional travel industry. At his current position at Nomago, his main focus is reinventing the company from transport to mobility and developing customer-centered services. So stay healthy and thank you again, AmCham Croatia.
Thank you, Vida. And I'm inviting now Ilias from Greece to introduce their guest speaker. Ilias.
Good afternoon to all. Hello, Andrea. First of all, thank you, AmCham Croatia, Andrea, Dražen, and your team for setting up this very interesting event, and also my fellows in the other AmChams for participating we hopefully that the discussion will lead to some concrete, let's say, proposals for our tourism representatives. I want to say that the tourism sector was hit very hard in Greece as well, I guess, I assume in your countries as well. And our AmCham, with our tourism committee, is working very hard in assessing the situation and at the same time, proposing the measures for a roadmap for the next day. On behalf of our AmCham, Mr. Andreas Ilianopoulos, who is a member of our board of directors, and at the same time member of our tourism committee, will represent our AmCham in this discussion. Andreas has a very long-standing experience in the tourism sector, and particularly in the cruise industry. And I'm sure that he will explain very well what is the impact of the virus and this particularly in the tourism industry. Thank you all, and hopefully see you next time live. Bye.
Thank you, Ilias. It's good to hear you and to see you all. Now I would like to invite Mr. Siniša Topalović, partner with Horvat HTL, who will give us a short introduction on the state of play in tourism globally. Siniša, please join us.
Hello, thank you very much, Andrea. Thanks everyone for joining this discussion. I'm very much looking forward to productive discussion that we are hopefully going to have with our esteemed panelists, but also in the time after we finish the panel, there will be also, as I understand, time for questions and answers, where I believe the additional discussion with all participants can be taking the place. Starting with the overall state of play and impact of COVID-19 to tourism industry, I think that the best way would be to start with overall COVID-19 overview of the health crisis timeline and actually some kind of major
milestone. Zdaj glasu zanka, oni ne morejo, pa Evelyn ne more, pa tako. Tako da jaz predlagam, da mogoče mi vsem vam pošljemo.
Oh, okay. So let's start with the overall timeline. With the beginning of actually end of December, 31st of December, the first registered case actually happened in Wuhan in China. And since then, the situation has significantly exploded in just 2 weeks. So we have seen expansion outside of China, and we have seen also human-to-human transmission taking the first place also in Wuhan mid-January. At the same time, Wuhan gets in the lockdown on the 23rd of January, and then following, we have detected cases and spread to Europe, especially first cases recorded in Italy and Spain at the end of January, whereas we have very fast progression, and then the World Health Organization proposed the name of COVID-19 on 11th of February. And then since we have also experienced lockdown in Italy, a few days later, lockdown in France, and then actually throughout the March, we have seen the number of lockdowns throughout the Europe. Then in the second part of March, we've seen also some kind of optimism in context of health crisis, because there was the first day with no infections in China. And then also on this optimism, beginning of April, a week ago, we've seen that Wuhan lockdown has been lifted. And then actually we've seen new cases in China on 13 April. And then because of that, we've seen that there is also a growing fear of second wave of the outbreak. So actually, the future is, at least from today's point of view, very ambiguous. Situation changes on a daily basis. If we want to see how all of this impacted economy, we've seen that such health crisis heavily impacted economic sector for sure. So we've seen significant drop of values of shares. We've seen significant impact on manufacturing industry in particular, especially in China, and then after China in Europe and globally in US as well. With all of that happening, economic recessions and voices about economic recessions are unavoidable, meaning that there is number of projections of economic
Nisam mogla da
slowdown.
čekam zato što su redovi ogromni, nije bilo prolom vode, uzela sam suzu.
World Bank and International Monetary Fund are actually also mobilizing their all financial resources to make them available to member states for additional public debt by the governments. So all of this happening in the overall economic sector is also having strong impact on tourism sector as well. Speaking of this, by end of 2020, air transport is going to heavily suffer hit from this crisis. So at the moment, we've seen that there is a approximately 44 to 50% passengers revenue decrease planned for 2020. All geographies are heavily impacted as we speak. So in this context, we would say that there is no airline who is at this moment not suffering significant losses. In addition to this, hotel bookings have dropped significantly. So OTAs are actually expecting almost 12 billion of revenue loss during 2020, which is also a strong impact on the market as well. One of the strongest impacts that we see today is visible in hotel industry. Hotels are heavily impacted over last months. They operate at occupancy levels which are below 10%. Just for you, annual averages are above 60 to 70%. So we are actually speaking of empty hotels, those which are open, but we have significant chunk of the hotels on national levels which are completely closed until further notice. So this is additionally complicating the whole story. So as hotels will suffer strongest hit over the next months, together with some other segments of the industries, governments will have to give particular attention to this segment if they want to preserve health of touristic sectors in their own economies. Restaurant industry as such is also suffering significantly. Decreases are over 90% in terms of revenues over last weeks in March, April, February as well. So the restaurant and food and beverage industry is also suffering as much. Cruise industry has been in the spotlight as well, as they are at the moment perceived as one of the epicenters of the contagion. Carnival Corporation has significant share price drop, more than 80% compared to January of this year. So it's really interesting to see how our panelists are going to look and see what's going to happen with cruise industry. And all of this is obviously heavy, signaling that we are in a heavy situation. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There are different scenarios which are at the moment being discussed among industry professionals. So at the beginning, there was we scenario, which is most desired by highly unlikely. It was supposed to have strong drop and then immediately strong recovery throughout this summer. But obviously, due to health reasons and security reasons, this is highly unlikely to happen. Then we had U scenario, which is desired and potentially achievable in more optimistic scenarios. So that kind of scenario is envisaging recovery by the end of the year, especially in the autumn period. There is also this unfortunate L scenario, which is applicable to certain tourism niches. For instance, more often and more often, cruise industry is being discussed to be in this position because, as you can see, it's obviously going to be some kind of strong drop and then very questionable recovery until vaccine or some kind of medicines are going to be on the market. Recently, scenario which is being discussed heavily is actually this W scenario, which is actually suggesting that after the strong drop which we experience now, that we will see some kind of recovery uptick during main summer season in Europe, especially focusing on July, August, and September. Then afterwards, after this peak is gone, then we are going to come back to normal, minimized business travel, and then only in the next year, beginning of next year, spring or summertime, we will see actually stronger recovery as vaccine is actually expected to get on the market. In this context, what we see and what is being also discussed is some kind of different speed of recovery of different segments of demand. So what at the moment is being globally discussed is that individual leisure travel is expected to develop faster, individual business travel a little bit slower than that. But then we have group segments in the tourism being group business and group leisure travel, which are expected to recover much slower because of obvious big groups of people and health concerns. And then obviously we have to ask ourselves, what is the way forward? And now discussing about way forward, we can say that there is a lot of questions, a lot of opinions, but there are no exact answers as we speak. What is good on the market that after February, where you can see selected Chinese destinations and their hotel occupancies, they're actually picking up. So compared to February, where they were operating at below 10%, we've seen that by the end of March, hotel occupancy in China, in major China destinations, has been recovered to approximately 35%. And we've seen that in this recovery, leisure destinations are actually recovering much faster than business and administrative destinations. So you can see Beijing, which is actually still one of the lowest performing hotel sector in China, around 20% hotel occupancy, because the public sector is actually recovering and getting up a little bit slower than the private sector. And therefore, Shanghai is actually performing much faster in terms of recovery. Also, when we look at the future, we see, for instance, light at the end of the tunnel, because people are actually craving to travel. Italians, which are one of the most suffering destinations at the moment, they're actually, for the second half of the year, they are actually searching for flights much stronger than compared to the same period of the last year. So in second half of the year, Italians are searching for flights significantly more than compared to the previous time of the year, meaning that Italians are also craving to travel as soon as medical situation will allow to. And also looking at what we see, European flight searches and European flight bookings, we've seen also that the second half of the year, where you can see is actually improving significantly in terms of searches, but also in terms of bookings. So after November, as we can see, bookings are picking up, and then searches, because people are more optimistic, searches are actually going to recover as early of September and November significantly. So people's expectations are actually optimistic. So the only thing that we have to see is actually how the medical situation is going to develop over the next months and weeks. So that will actually dictate how the tourism industry is going to react. But obviously, as we speak, there is stamina on supply, on demand side, and people are still not losing their faith, and they are still dreaming of traveling and looking forward to get out of this lockdown situation. So what we've seen in China, for instance, there is significant wave of revenge shopping. So the people after being locked down, they went to luxury stores, to boutiques, and started shopping like crazy. What we see on the market, that also this kind of pattern could be transmitted also to travel industry. So we could expect revenge travel as well. So people traveling outside of standard patterns just to get away from all this trauma that they have actually experienced. But in order to be able to host this future demand, huge responsibility is on governments. they are main factor of stability for tourism industry in these unprecedented times. So those countries which are going to be able to provide stability to tourism and hospitality sector in this short period of time will actually enable this industry to recover much faster and to provide higher quality services, and also to capture this increasing demand which is going to get on the market as soon as we have this lockdown situation solved. So in that context, I would like to wrap up this short exposition and actually open up the space for everything that goes after this presentation. So now I would like to invite State Secretary Mr. Tonči Glavina to join us and to give a Croatian perspective. After him, we will have representatives from Montenegro, from Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Greece. So screen now and actually open up space for Mr. Glavina. Tonči, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Topalovic. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Croatia, and a warm welcome on behalf of Ministry of Tourism, and of course, myself as well. And thank you for AmCham Croatia and AmCham in all the partner countries that participated in this call. It's great that you're organizing these meetings in which we can discuss the current situation. And meetings like this and discussions that we're having these days all across the board definitely go a long way of proving that everything is possible, because a few months ago I think we would all believe that these type of meetings and discussions would be very impossible, but we're all adapting very quickly. And I'm mentioning this on purpose because we are definitely showing ability to adapt quickly, and I think us as a tourism industry overall, if we want to survive and if we want to continue to develop and grow, that we need to adapt quickly as well, and that would probably go a long ways of salvaging somewhat of a tourism traffic that we can have in this year, and of course in years to come. So I will briefly try to discuss with you and present to you things that were done on a governmental level on behalf of Republic of Croatia. Siniša mentioned in his introduction speech that, and in presentation highlighted that government response for these activities for this situation is very important in terms of kickstarting and further developing the sector, all the sectors, economy in general. So, and I believe that we have truly done that in Croatia, as we were one of the first countries to come up with the measures, and we already have conducted several rounds of economic measures to develop, to salvage the economy, and we are constantly working on new measures, and we will adopt and move accordingly. So what we have tried to do on the governmental level is we have tried to definitely really understand the problem of the economy that we have. And in our measures, in the first steps that we have conducted, we have tried to stop the panic. We tried to stop the widespread fear that was happening, and to control the situation in a way that everybody has time to look, think, and then act accordingly what's in its best interest. Since Croatia, about 20% of GDP is related to tourism and tourism travel, our voice as a Ministry of Tourism, and of course tourism industry overall, was very present and very important in terms of all these measures that we have done. So on the governmental level, what we have done is you could say, I guess, two levels of measurements. First will be horizontal measures that go across the whole board for all the industry, for all the economy, for all the sectors, but then as well as some particular per sector measures that pertain to only that particular industry or sector or whatnot. And of course, for tourism as a whole, since our big part of GDP is in tourism, both these horizontal measures are extremely important, and of course some of the measures that we have done ourselves. So I will start explaining some of these measures, and first I will go with widespread horizontal measures on the governmental level, and then I'll move on the measures that we have conducted in terms of tourism sector. So first, like I said, already we have reacted to stop the widespread panic and fear. So our first set of measures was all related to postponement of all the public payments that you have towards the government in terms of taxes, revenues, or employee taxes and such, because at that first point we didn't know how big this impact is going to be, how long it's going to last, but it was important to send a message to the economy, to the sector, to maintain employees, to maintain jobs. And then we have built on that process from the first step to the second step. So I will maybe just present them as a whole right now. It will probably be easier to follow for everybody, for anybody who's not necessarily familiar with the details. So we'll start with the financial end and tax end. So far we have graded the effect certain sectors have this crisis has on the certain sectors. So basically for the sectors who are impacted more than 50%, meaning that more than they have drop in their revenues more than 50%, we consider them to be the ones that are exposed the most, and as such they qualify for the most beneficial set of measures, meaning that they are completely forgiven or they're completely free of paying employee taxes, paying income taxes, and other public goods that are collected through the revenue service. And in terms of a value-added tax, before the crisis, the policy of Croatian government was the value-added tax was paid each month, regardless of when you pay, when you are able to collect the amount of the bill that was issued. But now it has been changed for everybody to be value-added tax to be paid upon receive of the payment from the invoice that you have issued. So this is something that's going to help tremendously in terms of liquidity of the companies. Now, from this set of measures, it's very important to mention that there is like a whole set of fiscal and parafiscal payments that are in this circle, because everything that goes to the Ministry of Finance or Internal Revenue Service is conducted here. So basically, all the payments that you have towards the government, in most sense, are basically down to zero. And not only that they're delayed, but they are forgiven or they're eliminated. And this goes month per month basis, as long as this special circumstances that due to the relation of pandemic of coronavirus is happening. The second very important measure, and this is one that is extremely important for us in tourism, is a measure to save the jobs in the industry, in the economy. So now what we have offered to the whole sector is for all the employers in Croatia who are impacted by, of course, this crisis, COVID-19, is a minimum salary, minimum wage for the monthly period that's being paid for every job that is being saved. And right now that means that's about a total amount of gross 800 euros per employee. So employee gets net pay of about 550 euros net pay per month, plus there's about amount of 250 euros of on employee taxes that government is also taking upon itself. So basically, this is a very clear message to the sector. Do not fire any of your employees, or let go, maybe is a better word. Do not let go any of your employees. For each employee that you save, that you do not let go, we will pay his or her salary in the amount of 550 euros net per month, or 800 euros gross per month. And this is a measure that has been very popular, and so far we have more than 600,000 jobs saved through this measure, and 600,000 people who are currently using this particular measure. Now, under the employment
interruption, you have left only 1 minute, so it is actually time for you to kind of wrap up or hurry up. as we have to be on time because of other speakers as well.
Okay. The rest of the measures from economical standpoint relate to the liquidity or financial part. So we have several different programs that go through the national rebuilding bank and also through our banking sector in general in terms of allowing liquidity loans at a very affordable rate. Plus, we have one particular program developed for tourism. This is something a program that's made by Ministry of Tourism, in which we have financed about 26 million kunas in order to allow more than 600 million kunas of loans to go to the sector with a zero interest rate. So. This is something that's very important for our sector, of course. And then, as well, we have done measures to save. We have written off payments for tourism membership fees, fees for tourism taxes in general and overall. So basically, on behalf of Ministry of Tourism, we have written off every single payment, every sort of obligation that we have for the first 6 months of the year, in order to preserve every job and every company in the tourism sector in Croatia. And since probably time is close to running out, this is kind of like the sum up of everything. There's a lot of different measures, a lot of different sectors that we're covering as well. And we also have a plan in the next round to do additional write-offs, but we will discuss that, I guess, a little bit more at some point in the future. But so far from me, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glavina. Now I would like to invite your counterpart from Montenegro, State Secretary Mr. Damir Davidovic, to join us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Tony. I would like to use the opportunity, of course, to thank to our friends from the American Chamber of Commerce for organizing this, and I think it's a timely discussion. So again, and to avoid the situation that Tonči was in just a moment ago, that when we started to talk from the governmental jobs that we cover, we always need a little bit more time with the best intention of explaining everything. But I'll try to be as concise as possible, and of course later we can go into any details. First of all, Montenegro was lucky. We were the last country in Europe that got the COVID virus. So what we did actually, that we implemented a number of measures that had economic impact before that actually the first case showed up in Montenegro. So on the March 15, we went under lockdown for a number of commercial properties, for restaurants, bars, and so on and so on. The first case in Montenegro was on March 17, and the first economic measures that the government introduced were already on March 19th. And of course, as Tonči rightly said, the first message that the government wanted to say that, you know, that we want to try in this difficult situation and challenging to show the support and to send the message of stability which is needed in this process. So to go through some of those measures, the first one would be that all credit lines for the citizens and all companies and so on, they could ask for it to be postponed for 90 days. With all the banks, microcredit institutions, investment development fund, which is a governmentally owned fund, and so on. Then we went on to postponement of all the fiscal obligations that any employer has with regards to the wages that it pays to its employees. We have created a specific credit line with the investment development fund for small, medium-sized enterprises and so on, with the maximum support up to 3 million euros, and it's a liquidity support. The total value of this program was 120 million euros. Then there were some social measures and so on. Then we also, the government postponed paying all the occupancy rates for all the areas or all the spaces that the government or the governmental institutions are renting. And we underwent some I wouldn't say cuts, but we put a stop on with regards to all the additional pay to the government employees that we had so far in order to limit the budgetary expenditures. After that, on last week, we have published the draft of the second wave of measures. And these are the measures that are going directly to support to the economy in general. So, for all the parts of the economy that are closed with the order of the government, and as I said, we started the closure on March 15th before the first case. The government is going to pay 70% of the minimum wage for all workers, and up to 100% of all to how to put this, obligations towards the government to do up to the maximum minimum wage. Also, for the ones that were not closed by government decisions, but have considered hampered with everything that happened, it goes up to 50%. For all the parents that had to stay at home, because we made an order that every employee that has a child which is under 11 years old, they can stay. One of the parents can stay at home, of course, to guard the children, having in mind that of course all the kindergartens and schools and everything is closed. They will receive up to 70%. They will receive 70% of the minimum wage. Actually, they're employees. Also, for all the citizens that are in the quarantines or self-isolations, they will receive also that. And we have introduced a measure that we will pay 70% of the minimum wage to all employers who actually employ new people in the beginning of April, and that measure will last for the next 6 months. The month that we took into consideration that we applied these measures on is the month of February, because we wanted to make sure that we release go directly and target as much as possible businesses that are directly affected with the coronavirus. The reason for that is when we speak about the tourism industry, Montenegro has some 460 hotels, and in February we had 183 hotels working. I maybe forgot to measure that the last set of measures covers approximately 100,000 employees in Montenegro. As you know, Montenegro is not a big country. Our population is 625,000 people. We were lucky that we were a little bit ahead of the curve, and we are expecting these second measures are being actually discussed with the political parties, with the economists, with our social partners, and so on. And I expect them to be probably adopted during the next week. What we do in the meantime is that we have created separate teams, and one of the teams is also a team for tourism, which is going to go into details. We'll have participation, of course, of the government representatives, National Tourism Board, representatives of the industry, and we will try to target the measures in order to create the biggest possible effect. What played a little bit into this in this situation, which is not positive at all, and unfortunately I'll have to agree with everything that Sinisha said, how the situation looks right now, is the fact that the high seasonality that we have here, which was always considered a challenge, and we still consider it a challenge, played a little bit into this. And it also, so we have, I would say, two situations. The one is really to try and to support all the establishments that are working throughout the year. And of course, I expect second challenge to be when we see that the health situation is improving, on how to create conditions for the people who are willing to open their hotels or agencies and so on when this is finished, because we, as you said, we have a lot of them that are working only through the summer season. Not only the summer season, but I would say 6 months a year. It's really a challenge for all of them now, having in mind that, of course, everything is for April and May more or less canceled. Some of the reservations for second half of June are still there, and we are all very optimistic about July and August. If everything goes well with the health situation and we manage to keep it under control. What will be the challenge, by my opinion, when hopefully this all comes to an end, speaking of the health issues, is really that we're going to have, it's going to be, I would say, like a Wild West, so to say, because every country, every industry, they will try to pick up and to use this period to gather as much income as possible. I think it's going to be a large pressure on the prices. And we already see that in every country, which is completely normal. It's the case in Montenegro, as I'm sure in your countries, that we are all inviting our citizens to spend their holidays in our country. So I think it's going really to be the target measures will have to be targeted, but it's really going to be difficult to do that now or pass them now, implement them now, having in mind that we do not know when this is going to finish. Again, we all agree that there is not going to be a large groups coming, business groups or leisure groups. We see that every country, we already have some statements internationally. I would say that people would like to go to the nature, would like to go to smaller establishments where there will not be a lot of people, and so on and so on. So I think it's really difficult to make assessment at this moment, because there are so many things that we really cannot make the right assessment at this moment. We will probably go into preparing for a couple of scenarios, and depending how this is going to play out, we will have to see what happens with tour operators. You were mentioning the cruising industry, Siniša in his presentation. Kotor was very big on cruising industry. We had, as I said, Montenegro has 625,000 inhabitants. Last year, we had 625,000 visitors from cruisers just in Kotor. And of course, that is going to have a serious impact. I fully agree that it's going to take quite some time for it to recover. If it recovers to the level that it used to be, probably a lot of changes will have to introduce, especially standard-wise, and so on. I think for Montenegro, what is going to be for the airline companies, how their process is going to develop, because approximately last year we had 2.6 million visitors on our travelers on our airports, which is quite a lot. So I think this is also going to be one of the challenge. I think it's going to be very important to find the proper partnerships. The fact that Montenegro is not a large destination, which was a challenge for some of the things, I believe on this occasion it can be an advantage. But again, we will have to use this opportunity and to act quickly and to try to find the right opportunities. I saw today a very interesting initiative that you had, that colleagues from Croatia had, at least I read it in the newspapers, with this initiative from the Czech agencies and so on. Maybe this is something that
you have 1 minute. Time is up for you, so maybe I would like to ask you just to quickly wrap up in 20 seconds so we can move to another speaker. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's really difficult to move up, to wrap up, and to play very smart at this moment, proposing with some solutions. I think that let's see what everybody has to say, and then we can take it from there. We are dedicated to the safe industry. Industry is crucial for us. It represents, Tonči said that in Croatia tourism is around 20%. In our case, it's 24%. So it is very important. It employs a lot of people. It provides a lot of revenue to the country. So it's going to be definitely under special attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davidovic. With those thoughts, let's move to another speaker. I would like to now invite Mr. Jan Herget from Czech Republic to give us alternative view on the current situation, but from perspective of National Tourism Organization of Czech Republic. Mr. Herget, floor is yours, and your 8 to 9 minutes are awaiting for you. Here you go. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will be brief and short. We are part of the Ministry of Regional Development, so we are part of the, let's say, recovery plans. And as in most of the European countries, we have also horizontal measures. We have a program that's called Credit, which is giving possibility to receive special credits. We have program Antivirus, which is kind of Kurzarbeit, so the people that are employed receive money from the state, and the entrepreneurs don't have to pay the full payment. There are different categories. It's up to 80% that the state covers, but depends what kind of category you are part of. And then we have program for entrepreneurs, which is called 25, and everybody receive kind of 1,000 euros. So it's not much, but it helps to let's say, to survive this 1 to 2 months of, let's say, lockdown. Then we have some sector measures, but they are not ready yet. So we are communicating with the associations and with the entrepreneurs what is the priority. And to be honest, we have to say that the the amount of money is limited. So they have to choose what should be supported. And one of the most important is first, the parliament approved the law, so-called voucher law, Lex Voucher. So it means that the consumers have to accept the voucher from the tour operator, so the tour operator doesn't have to give money back. There are some exceptions, like people above 65, schools, etc. But in general, the payment that was done to the tour operators should be exchanged for vouchers up to end of the year of 2021. So it gives some level of stability for tour operators and for travel agent, so that they don't have to pay money back. Second part, which is done, which is discussed, but it's not approved yet, is the decrease of VAT. It's more for Czech hotels and Czech restaurants, because all neighboring countries like Austria, Slovakia have 10% VAT, and the state is asked to decrease the VAT also to 10% from 15 where it's now. And then there are some very specific COVID-4, COVID-5, COVID-6, which are small money, but it gives specific payments to tourist information centers, destination management organization, and organizers of events, because they had to close without any support. So there are specific, let's say, credit or direct payments to specific sectors. And we, as a tourism board, we are naturally asked to change our activities. Before COVID, the aim and let's say the strategic focus was aimed at the incoming tourism. So regions and entrepreneurs ask us not to do domestic tourism, because they thought that they can do it by themselves. But right now, as the borders are closed and nobody knows where we will open, we naturally support regions and entrepreneurs, and we are preparing the domestic campaign, which should be started as soon as the lockdown is, let's say, away, because right now we are still not allowed to travel. The hotels and restaurants are closed, so we are waiting. And we have planned right now, we have 5 different stages, starting at 20 April, ending at 8th of June, when the certain shops, based on the size, certain services based on the direct touch with the clients are opening. But there is always said that the stages can change according to the updated situation with people that are sick or died. So it's a very unstable situation for everybody, as nobody knows what will happen. There were, to sum up, they were done the horizontal measures to support small SMEs and entrepreneurs to not to fire the people, to keep the people employed. We are preparing certain sector measures. Part of it is also campaign to support the domestic tourism.
Mr. Herget, thank you very much for your concise presentation. Now I would like to ask Mr. Marian Beltram to join us. He is coming from Slovenia. So, Mr. Beltram, please share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, hello, hey everybody. I'm Marian Beltram, coming from Slovenia. I would like firstly to thank everybody for this great event, especially AmCham Croatia, and for the invitation. I come from a different beast, let's say. I come from travel, as not from, I will talk a little bit more from, not from governmental point of view, but more from a business point of view. So maybe to start quickly, a little bit of history about us. we started 20 years ago, so in the year 2000, and basically for the past 20 years, we always been like in a kind of crisis management, yeah? September 11, 2007, 2008 financial crisis, then there's epidemics like SARS and bird flu, so we always, you know, I think the whole travel is always the first one to get hit by international events like COVID-19. And we were always adapting, and at the end, you know, I have to say the travel always bounces back. That we have to stay positive about it. And I think that we need to remember that after WHO, after SARS, when the policy was by WHO that everything is safe and everything is good to be, you know, good to travel, that travel bounces back really fast. So unprecedentedly fast. People want to travel. People want to, you know, go away. Like it was said about Italy, and everybody's, you know, searching. They want to go out, you know. So little bit of that, and on the other side, I would like to add to the timeline of Mr. Siniša Topalović, from a business point of view, what was happening to us as a company. I call it blitzkrieg in travel, and it all started on 24th of February when the Italian story basically came to the news cycle. And as Slovenia is, like, I would say the closest neighbor to the European Wuhan, yeah, this was, you know, a doomsday for us, yeah. So the next day, the whole business in our travel sector went down by 50%, and like week later, it was really fast. You know, we were just, you know, basically we saw nobody traveling anymore, nobody, you know, talking to us anymore. We were just doing other stuff, you know. We put people on annual leaves and etc. Another week later, the Ljubljana airport was closed, and the borders were closed with Italy and then with other countries. And then 13th of March, basically we had to put 90% of our employees. And Nomago is a big company. We have 915 employees. 90% of employees on let's say on dormant or on waiting or something like that. This is the possibility that we have by Slovenian law, which is I think a great option that we have. And so yeah, for the past 5 weeks we were basically just looking at weather and waiting for what's going to happen on the let's say European or worldwide market. Yeah. So how is our government response? This is really important, I think. Yeah. All those dormant employees are being subsidized by the government. The employees get 80% of the paycheck, and this is 100% subsidized by the government, which is a measure I think that really will help to you know, have all these employees stay with us for the future and for this lockdown. This was the initial really fast response from the government, and now the second phase or second wave of sector measures is coming in, and let's hope that they're going to be put in really fast. So they're going to include the maximum liquidity measures. I'm going to talk only about the travel directed sector measures, and they're mainly focusing on liquidity, which is I think a great thing. Our government is doing the same thing as Czechia is doing, a voucher law sort of. So that you don't need to refund the money. You offer the vouchers for the travels that were booked, and this is giving us the possibility that, you know, people will stay with us in the future, and that we have the liquidity for our operations. Also, some lending schemes are coming in, subsidized by the government, and this, I think, is also important to give us, when we come back, when we start working, we have a possibility to start with the fresh money in our pockets. Also important, as we all know, that this is not going to be just a 2-month period for travel. It's going to be a long-term problem or a long-term situation that we're going to be facing. Is that we're going to have prolonged waiting periods or dormant employees that are going to be also subsidized by the government. The government is promising us subsidized shorter working hours. So this is all coming from the governmental side, and I think this is all a very, very welcoming for the travel industry in Slovenia. Also, there were some talks about helicopter money for travel, which were basically just talks about it, but I think helicopter money for Slovenia domestic travel would be a great mean of help for the whole business. Yeah. So yeah, for the future, we have to ask ourselves some questions. Yeah, how, where, and when will the people start traveling, with us and start, spending their money. The when is always, as always, it's not up to us. Yeah, it's up to the government and up to the decision of how much fear factor will it be letting out, or how much fear factor how much fear will prevail. I'm sure that a lot of people are only waiting to start traveling, and I think this should be done really smart, and everybody needs to think about first, of course, health, and the second one about also business that are dependent on this fear factor. Where, we are obviously, everybody's talking about domestic travel, but we need to be aware of something, that countries like Slovenia with 2 million people, and we heard Montenegro 600,000, Italy, Croatia is also a small country by European or world standards. I think that EU should come forward and for once, say, look, EU, at least Schengen is one country. We have to have a huge domestic. This is a domestic market for us, in my opinion. And I hope that the government will and the EU legislation will see that this is the future. And with that, I think that the recovery will be much faster, and it could go into the W recovery phase instead of U or L. And I do hope that this will be done by the institutions. How will we travel? Also, this is something that, in my opinion, should be. It will be more individual in the next few, at least in the next, let's say, half a year, and only then there will be groups coming in. Yeah.
Your time is up, so
okay.
If you want to wrap up, you can give us short wrap up before we get on stage with another speaker.
Yeah, I just want to say that we on the business sides are extremely grateful that the governments are understanding the size of the GDP that travel is contributing, and that we definitely need help here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beltram. We will definitely come back to you once we have questions, because I'm sure that people will ask for opinions and insights from private sector as well. So now I would finally like to invite our last speaker in this block, representative from Greece, to share with us situation in Greece. Mr. Andreas Stianopoulos, please join us, and looking forward to your views and opinions. Do we have Mr. Stianopoulos here with us? Yes? No? Okay.
Do you hear me now?
Yes. Now we hear you fully.
Is the connection okay? I'm loud and clear.
Perfect.
So,
perfect.
I think we're all on the same boat. We have too many questions with very few answers. One thing I have to add, definitely all governments, and from the previous speakers, seems that we are taking the right steps, all of us collectively, which is a very positive fact. And also in Greece, we've been very proactive with the Minister of Tourism. We as AmCham, we had a conference call the other day with the Minister of Tourism. And we have also the Greek Confederation of Tourism Enterprises as well being involved. We have the Ministry of Finance. So I think more or less we're all taking the same steps, whether we have to protect the employees and not come to a moment that we have to fire our people. So the minimum wage and we paid for the €800, the voucher, I think for economy of time, we are doing the same thing, all of us collectively. Now, I think I will agree that this is a very European momentum that we have to act together, and we need to find the best possible way to see how people would travel. Of course, this has to do with health issues, so in the protocol, so which we don't have the right answers. But the recovery is not going to be easy, especially in our segment, also for the cruise industry that I represent, and I'm also very I do a lot of business and I represent Royal also in the Balkans. So our main concern is we don't know when and how the ships will be deployed for 21, 22. We don't know where the companies are going to be next day, which is very important because it's becoming very, very difficult to maintain all these ships and this new growth under these circumstances. There's a lot of layoffs of personnel and employees from the cruise lines. So we are monitoring the situation because we also enjoy a very good business from the cruise sector in Greece, as you know, as also in the Adriatic coast. The main key here is how we can come back to recovery and what's the best model. I think we have on board our conversation Mrs. Dionysopoulou from the Ministry of Tourism, representing Mr. Theoharis, our minister. So I don't know if she would like to add anything. We need to be aligned, and we need to find ways to see how it's going to be the next day, because we don't know how many companies will be in business. So the model of our business will change as DMCs, as travel agents, tour operators, shore excursion handlers. And we don't know the model of the traveler for the next years to come. So we have to be smart enough to understand what's the next day on the habits and the behavior and the psychology of the guest, because definitely it's not going to be the same what we've been enjoying for the last couple of years. What else to say? The ports, the flights, because we need to embark a vessel, we need to fly in order to get to a port. So air aviation and the airlift is very important. And again, we go back to the protocols of how we fly and what is the new environment of how we're going to be flying. So everything is health related. So we need as Europe to be very aligned and work very closely to find the best possible ways to get out of it and to be ready for the next day. I don't have much to add. I think we're all more or less very responsible governments, and I have the sense that we are all going to do what we have to do. So we have to monitor, we have to be aligned, and maybe to have more calls like that and keep the good dialogue amongst us, because we're in the same geography more or less, and we need each other. That's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Mr. Stianopoulos, thank you very much for your insights. Thank everyone for sharing your valuable information with us. I would like to invite our speakers to stay with us and join in discussion that is going to follow. So should any of participants have any questions or comments, please type them in your conversation box. There is also this kind of chat function, so you can type in your questions in chat function, or just simply turn on your microphone and camera and ask a question, and then I believe that some of our speakers will be able to address any of your questions. But before we start with that, I would like to invite Mr. Kai Dickerman general manager from region Porto Montenegro Hotel and Resort, to share with us just shortly his view on effects of coronavirus having on hotel industry. So, Mr. Dickerman, if you're here, please turn on your camera and microphone, and we are eager to hear your voice as well.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be on the panel here, or to share. I will not take 8 minutes. I just wanted to quickly say hello and truly appreciate the initiative. I've now been here for 2 years, having the pleasure of looking after the region in Porto Montenegro. It's really and I believe I speak for everyone, that it's a very surreal feeling. After Montenegro shut its borders, as well as all food and beverage and basically hotel-related business on the 15th of March, we still had some guests in the hotel until the 20th, but then we had to close our doors as well. And I mean, us hoteliers, we excel when there's a buzz in the lobby, when you see the smile, the sparkle in the eyes of our young guests when you're there, when you hear the laughter in the restaurants, and all of this was gone, and this is gone in the countries. So it's a very surreal feeling. But fortunately, Montenegro was very decisive, was very quick, as Damir Davidovic pointed out, so to prevent the spread here in the country. And I think they've done a tremendous job. So now it's really for us, from a hotelier's perspective, we're waiting. We're waiting until the borders open again. But there's a fear. There's a huge fear of uncertainty. Fear of the staff. They don't know what's going to happen, especially in the seasonal environment that we're in. We have basically committed to seasonal employees, which it's hard for us to honor at this stage. So it's really a challenging situation. Fortunately, we at Region Porto Montenegro, we have an exceptionally supportive ownership. We play by the rules and follow the government measures, and it's really good to see what can be done in times of crisis. It's very important. Communication is just imperative, and you can see really how important it is for me, from a business leader's perspective, to keep the staff engaged, to really regularly every morning we still conduct our management meetings, because we need to prepare for when we reopen, even though we don't know as to when that will be. And when we reopen, I think it's very important that we as hoteliers stick together, that we do not start slashing rates, fighting for this little piece of business that we have. We need to stick together and maintain rates, not at the same level as we would have, but not significantly lower, because otherwise that's a long-term devaluation of the destination, and that would be a shame. And I speak not only for Montenegro, but really for the entire Balkans. Croatia, Greece, everyone is sitting there in exactly the same boat. And I believe the lessons that China has learned, not only now, but from the previous SARS episode several years ago, is that for us, value adds in the rate are more important than steep discounts. It will nevertheless be a very challenging and tough summer, particularly given our seasonality, where July and August are the peak season months, and if we miss these months, then the entire year is basically, well, screwed, as you could say. It's not only us, but it's the entire tourism industry, and we are really looking at business down by 60 to 70% for the year of 2020. What are the lessons for the future? You really have to learn from the past. I just heard this morning a very interesting story that the tennis tournament of Wimbledon, they actually, when they cancelled this year the tournament, they got a payout of 114 million pounds, because after the first SARS episode, they engaged in the pandemic insurance, which is now being paid out. So this is really something that we need to take on forward. And for us, from a hospitality perspective, hygiene standards will be becoming exceptionally more important. This comes down to central air conditioning standards in order to prevent viruses from spreading within buildings, air filters, and really the tangible factors of cleaning standards. As our colleague from Harvard said this morning, earlier on the call, I really hope that we will see a revenge, regional and domestic revenge travel, because that is really what we're looking forward for 2020 and then 2021. Thank you very much.
Kai, thank you so much for your insight. I think what you said, if I echo on some of the messages which you said, which I think are pretty valuable for hoteliers. You mentioned prices versus occupancy after we get into outside of lockdown period. Do you think this is possible in the region? I mean, how realistic you think hoteliers are going to be in preserving, or how persuasive they're going to be in terms of preserving ADRs and not falling into the trap of thinking that lowering down the ADR will drive the occupancy?
This will be exceptionally challenging because everyone will be trying to feed his or her own kids first, so to say. But I think it would be very, very important. I'm trying to see whether we can here with the colleagues, and I know that some of them are on the call here in Montenegro at least, open a dialogue as to see that we stick together, that especially in times of crisis, when you work together closely, you will benefit from it several years down the road. So I know it will be challenging. We here can work together on a smaller scale as a destination because we are a smaller destination. I know that for Croatia or Greece, this will be very challenging. But I do hope that we'll be able to work together because otherwise, as I said, I think it's a long-term devaluation of the destination.
And just before, because I really encourage people to start typing in the questions on your right side in the chat function. And while we are waiting for those questions, I have just one more question for you. And then afterwards, also a question for all participants and all panelists. Speaking of luxury, we've seen in China that I mean you're obviously part of luxury segment in tourism. The luxury segment is actually the slowest one in picking the pace. In China, they're still around 10-15% of occupancy, whereas mid-scale or budget are above 38% in some destinations already. So how do you see this in the case of Europe? Do you see the same pattern as China? Or you think that upscale and luxury is going to pick up faster due to summer holidays if we catch them?
Well, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that we in Europe will follow the Chinese pattern there for various reasons. First of all, many people who are traveling, who will travel, are impacted at the moment. So that means that the available amount to spend on tourism on their annual holidays is less. So that's why I think that there is a general decline in ADR, in average rate. However, we as luxury hoteliers, we're very resilient, we're very creative, and I'm pretty sure that we will be able to get our fair share of the market, albeit it will be less than the economy or mid-scale sector.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kai.
Thank you for having me.
And I am sure that there will be also some of the questions for you as well. I have the Mr. or Mrs. Dionopoulou asking to join in if possible. So yes, feel free to join in as we are still waiting for some of the questions. So I really encourage all participants just to type in the questions or hop into discussion as soon as you have something to add. Feel free.
Thank you. Thank you for this very interesting meeting and this exchange of practices, of measures that the states have taken in order to affect these very negative effects from the COVID-19. As from my position, I'd like to underline that the cooperation of the Minister of Tourism with all the relevant stakeholders to try to manage these negative effects are in the very high priority in the ministry. So the more crucial policy responses connected to the COVID-19 outbreak are linked to the impact on employment, impact on the tourism businesses, including SMEs, income losses and liquidity issues, and impact on the transport sector, mainly. It is crucial to curb income losses and retain liquidity issues to avoid permanent effect on this crisis and ensure that the liquidity of the financial sector can contribute to support the tourism economy. At any rate, we must remain very cautious and measured in our reactions. The sector has consistently proven its resilience and the ability to lead overall recovery, and this is something in Greece we know very well. Thank you very much, and Mr. Stylianopoulos, for this very, very interesting presentation. Thank you all of you for this very interesting meeting.
Thank you very much for your comments. We got also a question from Milena. She's asking a question for hoteliers. Do you think the virus will have the impact on the service style in the future once we reopen? How we will manage regular day operations, check-in, food service, etc.? Kai, maybe this is the question from your perspective. Maybe you can give us luxury insight. Is luxury going to be redefined in some way?
I think it will most definitely have an effect on the ways that we travel, on the way that holidays will be spent, on the way that business will be conducted and meetings will be held. As I said, the hygiene standards will become much more important. You saw maybe that some innovative hoteliers in Switzerland have created luxury quarantine stays. To which extent, where we're going to be, I think we don't really know yet what exactly is going to happen. China is a good 2 months ahead of us. We are Regent, we have sister properties in China. We can see and we will be able to learn and have the advantage of really having a bit of a head start as to best practices coming out of the East. But to where exactly we're going to go, I think it's still everyone's guess. We only know that hygiene, cleanliness, and these kind of standards are becoming more and more important.
Thank you very much, Kai. We have a question from Gregor Famira. The question is actually, I believe, more for a public sector, for ministries and national tourism organizations. The question is, how do you intend to convince tourists from Germany and Austria to come to Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, or Greece? Are there any special initiatives under consideration? Maybe David or someone from Croatian Ministry of Tourism or a colleague from Slovenia, Mr. Beltram. Is there any address from governmental perspective how to attract people from our most loyal drive-in or fly-in markets for Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, and Greece?
Okay, do you want to go first? Or?
Maybe Damir, feel free. So you were the one who started talking.
Okay, so to be completely honest, one thing that maybe we have not discussed significantly. It's really that we are discussing the COVID-19, and that's fine. It's a challenge, and there are a lot of uncertainties. We all hope that it's going to be finished soon. But what we have to really take into consideration is the economic impact. This economic impact that we are going to have is really difficult to estimate now, and that is going to influence all the emissive markets that we have here. If you look at the biggest rating agencies, they are actually going in. Fitch has changed its prediction in 20 days. They issued one in mid-March and then changed it in the beginning of April. And if we see that IMF said that EU countries on a yearly basis, their GDP is going to drop around 7%. If we see that the US has lost 22 million jobs in 1 month, we see what is happening with the oil things and so on. And so we are not even talking about the impact of Brexit anymore because things became much more complicated. For Montenegro, I believe that it will have to be, this is something that we will definitely insist on. It will have to be smart targeting, so to say. And as Kai mentioned, we are not large market, and I must also say I fully agree with him with how I think that we should deal with pricing policies this year. So yes, it's going to be a tough year. We all know that, but the fact is it really going to change significantly what will be the effect of what we get or manage to have as a long return this year if we decrease prices 10 or 15% more? If that was the answer, then everybody should do it. So I really think for us, it's going to be the key issue to play on appeal and to be very smart in targeting the markets and the niches in the markets that we need. This is something that we see as our competitive advantage. For the sole reason, as I said, Montenegro last year had 2.6 million tourists. The number of tourists that we get from the region, even though we are perceived traditionally that the region is the main part, they remained constant last 15 years. So all the increase in the Montenegrin tourism during the last 15 years came from the Western European market, to smaller portion to the Chinese market and so on. So I think it's really going to be about targeting, it's going to be about close cooperation, and to be completely honest, it's going to be about tailor-made solutions. So when we speak, as Kai mentioned, about Porto Montenegro or some other large projects that we have in the country or in the back of, let's say, Bay of Boca in general, I believe that it's going to be one approach. That approach is going to be very difficult to implement on mass tourism cities in Montenegro, such as Ulcinj and Bar and so forth. It will be north of the country with pristine nature and so on. This is going to be something different. So I think it's going to require a lot of cooperation. It's going to require really a lot of openness. And I believe that how effective all of us is going to be is really going to depend in between cooperation between the private sector and the state institutions. There's no point for state institutions to do something if it's not effective for private sector. So, us in the ministry, let's say, just to say for the sake of the argument, to sit here and to think what would be the best without consulting people who are the biggest hoteliers or the people who are the most recognized or the strongest companies, the most competent companies or individuals in the country with regards to the field of tourism. So
David, did you relate with the private sector players in terms of defining what are going to be Montenegrin targets for this year? In terms of cooperation between National Tourism Organization, which is actually performing marketing activities.
Yes, but this will have to be a joint effort. By my opinion, it's impossible to do it any other way. We will need the clear information for the private sector. We will have to be completely open from the institutional side and the governmental side and the ministry and the National Tourism Board in presenting the ideas based on information that we get, and we should be ready for the fine-tuning.
Yeah.
And again. Okay.
In line to what you said, there was the initiative, as we found out from media, just yesterday, that Czech tour operators are asking from government to set up some kind of air bridges or charter flights for Czech people traveling to Adriatic Sea. They were in first line mentioning Slovenia and Croatia, but I believe this can be also opportunity for Montenegro as well. My maybe question is also to see how Greece is actually progressing with this. Is there any initiatives in Greece related to targeting your primary markets? How is Greece going to attract Germans or Austrians or Polish people or any kind of other important markets which are not driving market but flying markets? Is there any solution in Greece?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'd like to say that Greece is a very safe country, and we try to manage this situation with a very mindful way. So we'll take all the necessary measures to in order to have a very safe home comeback process for the tourists, and this is our approach to attract and to host the tourist in a very safe way. In this approach, we design our next steps, and in the framework of the European Commission and the UNWTO, in order to become very specific for these measures, because we have to manage a very dynamic situation, and step by step we have these initiatives in a very concrete way. Thank you.
Siniša, ne čujemo te dobro.
I was asking, sorry, I was posing question to Andreas. Just a question from private sector perspective. Are there any discussions in Greece how to operationally address those key incoming key markets for Greece?
We are on a dialogue, so it's very premature to come up with a concrete plan. But I think it has to be marketing-wise an effort, and each one of us has to find the strongest and most best messages to bring out according to each one of us. So we don't need to compete, but we need to work together on that. So we need to become smarter on how we can all together be aligned in that strategy, so we support each other. It's like a pyramid. That's my thinking, my way of thinking. But it's gonna be quite challenging.
If anything, this is at least pretty obvious that only the challenge is going to be present throughout the year. Andreas, thank you very much for your reply. Andrea, as we are past the time, it's 3:30. I would like maybe ask you to join us.
Thank you, Siniša. Andres, I think you are trying to tell us something, but you're still muted.
I just wanted. Is it? Am I right now? Good. I think we should have. Yeah. I think we should again have the same type of meeting. It's very important to be on a constant dialogue these days, because I think we are becoming wiser from sharing information, and I think that's the only way to move forward. So I think we should set another date that we can have another call. It will be perfectly fine.
Thank you. I think that this discussion proved that you're right. It makes sense, definitely, that we share our thoughts. We didn't ask 2 questions. Maybe we still can, but if Mr. Dickman is here, please, I would ask you maybe to just give a very brief answer. Do you expect from government or banks some subsidies or reliefs due to debt in addition to the investment and development fund? That was a question from Mrs. Radushinovic from Erste Bank.
Well, for Montenegro, where I'm located, is obviously tourism is exceptionally important. 33% of the GDP originate from tourism. But I also know that the financial means of the government are sort of limited, and the governmental cash flow needs to be looked at as well. For me, the more support, the more incentives we get, the better. But maybe there's a possibility of just reducing the inflow towards the government through not paying social contributions and thus having an indirect subsidy. I mean, there's a couple of ideas that are being floated at the moment. And from a business perspective, the more people we can continue employing, the less people the state has to support. So I think that's very important to consider.
Thank you very much. And the last question for today from Mrs. Tsibulskaya, a question to the public institution. It is believed that clear international rules of tourist home comeback guarantees, if new lockdown happens suddenly, will be crucial to eliminate fear to travel. Is it being worked at on the government level? Is anybody thinking about that? Mr. Davidovic, is Montenegro thinking about this concept?
When we had this lockdown, we did not have any issue. And, you know, for us, I believe, I'm sure for all the colleagues here, the countries and state institutions, you know, it's a must. So I do not see it. I do not see it as a factor. Anyone who would think of not guaranteeing something like that or creating any kind of obstacle into this, I think, you know, then you could definitely close the season, and it wouldn't be human. It wouldn't be normal, so to say. So I believe it's one of the new things, as rightly mentioned, that and I liked very much the example of our colleague from Greece mentioned with regards to Wimbledon. I believe that this is going to bring us a lot of new, not to say standards, but a lot of new things that we will have to discuss. So the touristic product will become, so to say, more complex. No, on one side, at the service provider side, what was mentioned with regards to the health issues and so on and so on. But on the other side, you know, we will have to think about a lot of the things. We will have to think about the necessity, feeling of safe that the tourist is going to have. If for any reason the tourists do not feel safe or they do not feel comfortable that they will be able to go back to their homes, or they will have obstacles in going back to their homes, I think then we are all going to be in a serious mess. So I'm sure that we are all thinking about it. It's going to be one of the new things that we will have to adopt, that we're going to be the part of the product, the part of the presentation of the destinations. And you know, when all of this is finished, how we behaved in this process, it's also going to become a part of the image of our destinations. So were we reacting purposely? Were we reacting quickly? Did we forget to pay attention on the people to whom we were very proud of when they were coming to our countries years before? I have not seen that anyone is mentioning over tourism for the last month. So I do believe that this will become one of the, among other things, it's going to become one of the standards. Well, you know, we will be expected to present in an indirect way.
Thank you very much. It seems that we have exhausted our time for today. I hope that you all enjoyed the discussion and that it was also useful. Thank you all for joining us today. Special thanks to all our speakers for sharing their insight, and also to our colleagues in AmCham for partnering at this event. Again, stay safe and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you and all the best.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.